Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your popper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Barzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Actually, pretty well. I've been enjoying my time between work and going back to school, so been relaxing, spending time with my wife, spending time, actually putting in pre-research to the show because, spoiler alert, a lot of the times these episodes have been produced like 15 minutes beforehand, but, trying to bring you that...
Don't tell them how the magic works.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't show people how the sausage is made, but we're recording on a Wednesday again, so all sorts of wonderful things here. How have you been, Adrian?
I've been pretty good. Work's been busy. My days are just flying by, which is good. Good. It's good busy. I'm still transitioning my role. If anyone cares, and it's been challenging, but good. So I'm fulfilled also.
Wonderful. It's always good to know that you're doing well as I am. All right, so let's get into the upkeep. Just got some housekeeping we got to take care of at the beginning of every show. First off, this show is brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a wonderful, wonderful website. And the owner, Josh, is a friend. We had him on the show. And they do all sorts of neat magic accessories. They feature art from actual licensed magic art, as well as art from throughout art history. They have a wonderful set of tokens called the Classic Art tokens that are absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. They have all sorts of playmats. They have art prints. They have dice bags. And they're getting new stuff in all the time. They work with a lot of actual magic artists and license stuff from them. And they're always updating. So definitely check them out. And if you see something there that you just have to own, you can't live without it, be it a nice Path to Exile playmat or a nice art print of Ponder's art or any of a myriad of different options that they have available in their store, you can use the coupon code Commontary, all caps and spelled exactly as it is in the name of this podcast, and you'll receive 5% off, and we get a little bit of a kickback. So you're helping support the show, and you're also getting a discount on some really, really wonderful art. Also, I just noticed they just got in the 4 arts for the basic forest from Urza's Saga, which I happen to particularly like. Maybe I'll see if I can pick one of these up. What do you have for us, Adrian?
Well, just like every week, I'm here to also remind you that you can join our Patreon. For just as little as $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including the pre-show and post-show, and you get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord channel. And now that Mike has a little bit more free time, he's actually way more active in there. It's been hopping the last couple days, so we've been having some pretty good discussions. So we hope to see you down there sometime.
Yeah, and as always, the full episodes are neat. We had about 12 minutes of pre-show on this one, so a little bit of
pre-shows are getting much longer. It's nice.
They are. Thankfully, we did cut out the 20 minutes where we failed to figure out how to get Discord working, but probably
Whatever.
for the best. All right, so we've got a couple things that we'd like to mention in the greater world of Pauper. First off, price spikes continue to happen. You may have seen Chainer's Edict is $13. I have my 2 playsets. We've told you time and time again you should pick these cards up. But now more than ever, folks, card prices are going up. If you want to play these cards, pick them up now rather than later. Much like with whenever someone asks, when should I buy revised duels, the answer is 2 weeks ago. So I don't see these cards going down anytime in the near future, but just sort of a heads up. There were a couple other spikes. Needle Drop is up at $4. Preordain and Ponder are slowly climbing, so get in if you want to play in paper.
And that's how we became an MTG finance podcast. No, I'm not really an MTG finance person, but the spikes are so relevant because the format is new and people are trying to, really push the limits, I guess, of what these cards might cost. And, I know people don't like that, but, it's the side effect of having more people in the format, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, and you also wanted to bring up some juicy content you managed to chance upon this week.
Yes. Meanwhile, on Moto, I actually don't think there are any price spikes. I think Moto is pretty stable by and large. But Tom Martell actually made some popper videos over at Channel Fireball. He was playing what he called Five Color Tron. I honestly have not had a chance to check it out yet, but you totally should, and I will eventually when I get some more time at work. Or at home, I guess. But yeah, it's cool that like a big name like Tom Martell is making content for the format. He doesn't really make a lot of videos anymore, so it's pretty sweet. I love Channel Fireball, and that makes me think we have a lot of also really great streamers, content producers in our own community. So shouts out to all of them as well.
Yeah, and the last thing, and this kind of segues into our main discussion topic for the day, is Pro Tour was last weekend, and they revealed the packaging for Masters 25, which is kind of this enigmatic product that they're releasing this year that is cards from all 25 years of Magic's history. And the game turns 25 this year, so they're doing all sorts of stuff. And so far, the things that we have officially seen are Jace the Mind Sculptor and Azusa Lost But Seeking. There's also a key art on one of the booster packs that has not yet been identified. And there was a leaked, probably real from the looks of it, copy of Phyrexian Obliterator. And notably, this is a Masters set. We get downshifts in Master sets from time to time.
And to be honest, people cannot wait for them. Like between each of these like supplementary sets, people are like, what is going to get downshifted? What's going to get downshifted? Like people cannot wait for this stuff. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. And honestly, with this one, with Iconic Masters, we were a little in the dark because there was kind of the, it's going to focus on the 5 iconic tribes of Magic's 5 colors. And we don't really get most of those tribes at common. So it was kind of a question mark. With this, it could be anything. One thing I really do like, I don't know if you saw did you see the images of the cards they've spoiled?
I have seen the 3 you mentioned. They're not others, are there?
As far as I know, at date of recording, those are the only 3 that have been spoiled. But did you see what they've done with the text box for non-planeswalkers, I guess?
Looks like they did the watermark of the set.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really neat. Like it looks very impactful on Azusa Lost But Seeking, because you've got like the little Tori from whichever Kamigawa set that is. I don't remember them ever. But I think that's neat. But the reason we bring this up is obviously we will be covering whatever spoilers come out about this set that are relevant to Pauper. But more importantly, I have a discussion topic for today, and this actually spawned out of a discussion I had with one of my former coworkers about Commander. But the main topic we're discussing today is, has Pauper become a set that is dependent upon supplementary releases? So sets that don't pass through standard in order to have our metagame change and evolve in a meaningful way.
And that would put us on par with a format like Legacy, even more so.
Yeah. So the genesis of this was a discussion I had with one of my coworkers who also plays Magic, where I basically posited that the original claim was that the legendary creatures released in Commander products are disproportionately represented in the Commander metagame because they are inherently designed for it, and most of them are unhealthy. And I actually dumped a bunch of data out of EDHREC and ran the numbers and found that my claim was somewhat statistically supported. But then I also checked, and when I included other supplementary sets, it widened that. But as what I've noticed is I've continued to update these numbers as time goes on, and I've been seeing that each set that gets released in standard, we're getting a little bit closer to parity within that format. And the reason for that is they keep releasing better and better creatures, and with that, better and better legendary creatures. So it stands to reason that over time, Commander will start having more options from non-supplementary sets that are on par with the crafted for Commander legends. Now, I'm basically coming in here and claiming the exact opposite for Pauper. So I guess to start things off, Adrian, where would you fall on this? Do you think that the supplementary sets are more or less or equally important for this format as standard is, given the past like 2 years or so?
I would definitely have to say more. I'm spoiled a little bit because I have the list you created. And let me tell you, folks, the supplemental cards, every single one of them sees play or saw play till it got banned very extensively. And then the standard cards are much less so.
I mean, I think your phrasing there kind of betrays a little bit. There was a banned card that was released in a supplemental set.
Sorry.
No. I think that's a great way to illustrate it in just the fact that we haven't had a card since Treasure Cruise that passed through standard that had to get banned in Pauper. And Treasure Cruise had to get banned pretty much everywhere because it was a mistake.
It's restricted in Vintage.
Yeah, I think the only place you can just play it is Commander and Cube and Limited. Like, it is a fundamentally warped card that is bad for formats, but
those were weird times. We should go back and do a deck tech on one of the Treasure Cruise decks sometime because they were insane.
we really should, because there were some there was a brief period where like the Angler Delver lists were both existed and were running like there were just stupid things that people were doing where it was just like, I'm just going to play Treasure Cruise in this list because whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to get to 7 cards in the bin. I'm going to Ancestral Recall, and that's going to put me so far ahead in the game. But we digress here. So
yeah.
With supplemental sets over the past 2 years, and I actually crunched the numbers on this, there have been 129 cards added to the Pauper pool. So that is any common that was released in the Commander products. That's any common that was released in Conspiracy 2, Take the Crown. And also any downshifts in rarity that occurred in any of the, and I didn't realize this, 4 Masters sets that we've received in the past 2 years. For those keeping track at home, that's Modern Masters 2015, Eternal Masters, Modern Masters 2017, and Iconic Masters. So that's 127 cards. And then in comparison, new standard cards that we have not seen before, whether they be new or downshifted, we got 787 cards in that same time period. And the admittedly like thrown together list that I have here has 11 cards that see play out of the supplemental sets and 12 that see play out of the standard sets, with a difference of like 5 or 6 times the number of cards total. So statistically, it's not looking great.
Make of that what you will. Math fans.
Yeah, and obviously I don't want to bog this down too much in math, but just looking at the list here, like for supplemental sets, we have stuff like Ash Barons, Augur of Bolas, Burning Tree Emissary, Dinrova Horror, Elvish Vanguard, Lead the Stampede, Palace Sentinels, Peregrine Drake, Rally the Peasants, Seeker of the Way, and Thorn of the Black Rose.
Yeah, these cards are archetype defining, most of them. Like they fit into their archetype and are so integral to the decks that they are in that it's just like, how did the format is these cards essentially right now, except for Peregrine Drake. Yeah,
which should have been banned, but that's it happened. I can't complain too much. The only one of these that I think is like no longer like absurdly impactful upon the format is Rally the Peasants. And I think that's just because it was never like the core of the deck. It just helped be like a surprise win con.
It made more sense before, because Rally the Peasants was not downshifted at the same time as Palace Sentinels. Rally the Peasants was first, and it made more sense when Boros Monarch was still the Boros tokens list, where you had like Kuldotha Rebirth in your deck, 3 or 4 copies of that, and you were generally like much more of like an aggressive deck that had some like pretty good card draw. But the new Boros Monarch list, and even that's on the downsweep these days, is way more defensive than that. I actually like to run one in my list though.
Yeah. And it's not to say that card is now like unplayable. It's just, that is the least impactful one of them, and it still sees play. And on the standard side of things, we have things like Alchemist Vial, Fairy Miscreant, Firebrand Archer, Fragmentize, Gear Seeker Serpent, Metallic Rebuke, Natural State, Pulsa Marasa, Striped Riverwinder, Thermo Alchemist, Thraben Inspector. And the thing that I notice when I look at this list is it's a lot of cards that are either very narrow and only kind of fit into one deck, or it's stuff that is sideboard material. Like no one main decks Natural State or Fragmentize, but they are very efficient answers for very specific types of card. So I guess is that what standard sets are reduced to at this point? Like, are they always going to be just like the occasional card that's slightly more powerful than the rest of them, and then by and large sideboard cards, and we're just going to become a sort of a format that waits for these supplemental sets? Like, where do you see things going from here?
Look, so obviously the card quality here is less than the supplemental sets. In fact, you had an extra card on this list and you skipped over it. So, like it's way less powerful. Fury of Miscreant is useful. Could the Delver deck live without it? Probably. They could play another blue 1-drop. There are other ones out there. Firebrand Archer is good in burn, but again, is it really what makes that deck super powerful? The ones that I think are actually good and are very integral to their strategies are Pulsa Marasa. Sure, Tron would be good, but I think Pulse is really what pushes it over the top. And then Thraben Inspector. Thraben Inspector is insane, and it gets played in every single deck that's playing white right now. So I think that is a pretty good reason. I guess not every deck. I guess it's not played in Tribe combo. And then honorable mention to like Gear Seeker Serpent, which is strong and is played in Affinity, but not a 4 of.
Yeah, and I think the main thing here is like Thraben Inspector is just barely pushed enough and interacts favorably with things like Core Skyfisher just enough where, like, for example, if it created, I don't know, like a 0/1 creature token that you could sack for a card, that already would like reduce its utility within that deck because it can't help you activate your Galvanic Blasts and stuff like that. Like it's one of those cards where, because of the exact way it was designed, it just slotted in perfectly. But you change any sort of factor of that card and it just craters in value for that deck. So I think looking at this list, the main thing is like a lot of these are just barely good enough. Like Fairy Miscreant, a lot of times I've seen it just be a Zephyr sprite, just a 1/1 flyer for 1, and that's fine. It also happens to have the right creature type, so it helps, with your spell stutter sprites, but it's nothing amazing. And as you pointed out, like Firebrand Archer isn't exactly like making burn leap up through the rankings drastically. I would argue that Thermo Alchemist does a much better job of propping up burn just because it is slightly harder to deal with. But a large amount of these cards are kind of, they're just good enough. I'd argue that Gear Seeker Serpent is kind of an exception to this as well, just because it does have affinity printed on it without actually being keyworded. So I think that is very powerful. But looking at that compared to the supplemental product cards, these are just like, when Elvish Vanguard got downshifted, I was irate about that. I absolutely hated that card for the first few months of its existence. So I guess when we look at this, obviously Wizards has a wider range, like a higher power level that it can hit in these Masters sets because they are a slightly more cube-like limited experience. So again, I guess like, are we just headed to a point where a majority of what this format cares about is always going to be supplemental sets, and we, can kind of not look through as close a lens at standard stuff? Because, for example, Rivals of Ixalan, I have already forgotten almost every card in that set.
Look, sure, I don't think it's as bad as you're maybe making it out to be. We still got decent cards in the standard sets. Like, were they the best cards? No, but some of them were pretty useful and are still, relatively archetype defining. So I think it's unfair to say we'll never get it, but you're right. The rate is much, much lower. And honestly though, I guess really what it is like, I don't know if I care. Like, we're getting so many supplemental sets. It's so easy to get access to these new cards. So I'm not sure. I think it's okay.
I mean, I think that's a good thing that you bring up there. 'Cause like, it used to be that we got supplemental sets maybe once a year, and we've just been bombarded with them over the past couple of years. And I mean, look at Pauper where it was even just a year ago and compare it to now. And we've got all these brand new cards that are making headway. Like, we didn't have Seeker of the Way up until late last year, and that's showing up in Boros decks. And they're doing well. Augur of Bolas didn't show up until Modern Masters 2017, and I think pretty much every blue deck wants to run some amount of those in the format. So I don't know, I guess, and we can talk about this on a later episode. I'm excited to see what Masters 2015 brings us, because it is kind of this complete unknown, but we have this proven track record of getting an ever increasing amount of downshifts, because I don't know if you knew this, but each successive Masters set has had more and more downshifts to common. So I'm kind of really excited to see where this goes, because we could get literally anything in this set. It's
and I think that, like I mentioned earlier, is the general feel for players. And I mentioned earlier that puts us on a par with a set like Legacy. So, you know, yeah, it is unfortunate. It's very like lopsided, but again, I don't think it's a bad thing, and people get really hyped for it. Like, you're already excited about that set, and we only know 3 cards from it, and none of them are the commons.
Yeah, and I think part of what has caused this sort of shift over time, and I would love to crunch the numbers on like the first the blocks with the largest amount of Pauper staples in them out of curiosity. But, you know, Wizards has kind of pushed this idea of the new world order of design, and one of the tenets of that is keeping common cards at common rarities and even uncommon less complicated. And what we saw even as far back as, I think the first time it really sort of kicked into high gear was some point between Shadows over Innistrad and Kaladesh. We started seeing this sort of drastic increase in power level at the uncommon slot. We started getting stuff like Fatal Push at uncommon. We started seeing things like Blessed Alliance in Eldritch Moon, which is a modern playable card. And we're starting to see sort of simple but very efficient things occurring at uncommon. And what we're seeing at common is things being simplified to the point where I guess they have to do what they do at a more efficient cost than other alternatives, or they have to have some special little bit of text that sets them apart from similar effects. I'm thinking specifically of Pulse of Marasa, which we multiple times on the show have described as being just good enough where you wouldn't play any individual part of it, but the fact that they're all glued together makes it work. So I don't think that New World Order is killing Pauper, because we do have sort of this Masters and other supplemental sets coming out pretty much all the time now. But I do think that the New World Order design philosophy has damaged our chances of getting staples printed at common in a standard legal set. And I just don't know how to feel about this. Like, I would definitely feel worse if we were in an era where we weren't getting like 2 master sets a year, but we are. So I don't know if this is a bad thing per se.
Right. It, like I said that too. And so I think we're in agreement on it. I think it's just, standard players have their thing to get excited about, and then we have our thing to get excited about. Standard and modern players, I should say. And even legacy players, Fatal Push is a legacy playable card as well. But so I guess they actually do get So yeah, maybe Legacy actually does benefit a lot from this too. Let's compare ourselves to Vintage now. They don't get that excited. So,
I mean,
still,
with Vintage, you're talking about something where in like very specific types of cards are readily accepted into that format. For example, Monastery Mentor is still played in that format because it happens to jive really well with what you're doing in that format. And I guess the thing I want to mention here is we've talked a lot about the master sets. We talked a lot about the downshifts, but I also kind of want to look at the other type of supplemental set, the Commander products and the Conspiracy product that we got last year. These contain arguably some very, very powerful cards. And I guess, like, you know, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but I think that Palace Sentinels and Ash Barons are two of the most important cards Pauper has gotten in the past 2 years.
You think even more than a card like Elvish Vanguard?
Yeah, I think that Elvish Vanguard helped shore up an issue that one deck had, but the introduction of the Monarch mechanic as well as Ash Barons as an alternative form of fixing at common, I think both of those affected a larger amount of decks and also affected the metagame more strongly, because when Elvish Vanguard was released, we saw an uptick in elves, but it wasn't, you know, it didn't instantly shoot up to tier 1. It kind of, you know, was better. It was still like a tier 1.5-ish, tier 1 occasionally in the right metagame. So I think for me, even more so than the master sets, I think looking closely at future supplemental sets that are non-reprint based and looking at the mechanics contained therein is going to be a much clearer look at highly impactful cards in the future. Because Ash Barons, and I think I've said this before on the show, I think this card could be printed in standard. Like, am I off base here?
Yeah, I don't think you are. I think for a standard level format, it doesn't, you know, who cares about it versus Ash Barons? I think in Commander it's important because then you get around having to, you know, you get basically another copy of that. Evolving Wilds for Terramorphic Expansibility to get more basic, so maybe there it's a little bit more important. But in Standard, I think some decks play Evolving Wilds, but I don't think every deck plays Evolving Wilds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think the value is really that much higher. So I think it could. What I'm trying to get at is I think it could easily go into a Standard, and it wouldn't be, you know, game breaking or anything.
So I guess my question here would be: do you want to hazard a guess as to why it wasn't in a Standard set? Because we did just visit a plane where cycling was a mechanic.
It's more complicated than Ash Barons or Evolving Wilds, in that it doesn't act, you know, its ability doesn't act like other lands' abilities act. Maybe is that too complicated, you think?
I mean, I guess maybe. Okay, so I think what I'm trying to get at here is that I think that these supplemental sets, because they never pass through Standard, and Legacy is a fairly robust format that doesn't generally get shaken up that much, even by impactful cards. I think there's a certain level of like safety for Wizards when they're designing these supplemental sets that they can, you know, they don't have to worry about it in Standard. It doesn't hit Modern at all. It only hits Legacy, which only makes up a fraction of the player base. And even there, it kind of has the stopgap measure of, you know, Force of Will exists, so if this makes some nonsense, we're fine, right? So I think that with those concerns, I think moving forward, we're going to see that these products become more and more relevant to us as a format.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just weird to think about. You're right.
In what sense do you think that's kind of weird?
It's hard to put into words. I'm sorry. It's like I said, I don't think it's a bad thing. We still get plenty of powerful cards, but it's just weird to think that like there's this constant stream of cards that come in that we don't get to play with. And I know that sounds weird, but there's just so much chaff, and it feels like I guess it's great for limited though, right? But
well, yeah, that's why a bunch of these commons that we know are never going to see play exist is because they're fine limited cards for their environment.
Yeah, they just belong to another format. That's all.
Yeah, so I mean, if anything, this kind of highlights the fact that they've made allusion to the fact that they do somewhat pay attention to Popper when testing, and there was the whole thing that when Drake got banned, they said if they had known that they were going to ban Cloud of Fairies and Popper, they never would have downshifted Drake, and that's all well and good, but I think it does kind of highlight that Popper is still a format that's getting what we can, and we don't have specific cards designed for us. Because if I look at standard sets and the other format that I play fairly regularly is Commander, there are cards in standard sets which just reek of being designed for Commander. And I think that Popper still very much is a format that kind of we get whatever they choose to give us versus stuff being designed for it. And I think that's actually better for the format. And I'm going to go on a tangent here, but I'm sure you've seen people who've said, wouldn't it be cool to do a Popper Masters? And I actually think, unless it was just a way to reprint overpriced versions of Popper cards, I think designing something specifically for this format would be damaging to it.
It's also inherently strange because if a limited environment, by its very nature, contains rares, uncommons. Like you need those different rarities so that you can play around with archetypes. No, not all the cards in the set can be a common. But I wonder if you did like a From the Vault Popper, would that be a good thing? And that way you could still have those very choice reprints of expensive cards, give them a new foil treatment, and then be able to still support the format. And maybe that's flawed too because those sets tend to be very expensive. But maybe there's some sort of happy medium there where you could do something like more like that and less like its own limited environment.
Yeah, I think moving forward, like the idea of creating Popper specific products, and the professor recently did a video where he talked about the idea of doing Popper event decks that would be lists of Popper decks reprinted as, a specialty product. I think that could be fine. I guess my concern here is looking to a format like Commander, which does not only get its own specific product, but gets cards specifically sort of hyper targeted that will function in this format even in standard sets. Like there's plenty of cards that could be printed just fine as non-legendary creatures. They get printed as legendary creatures, and I have to imagine no small part of that is A, storyline, but B, the fact that it increases their playability in a format like Commander. And I personally am of the opinion, and this is definitely a take that I've heard other people have, and I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers with it. I think that the Commander products and their current incarnation actually are damaging that format long term. And I think that
hot takes, Mike Petchek.
It's not even a hot take though. Like I've heard other people talk about this, and I think it's the fact that, the moment you start designing for a specific format, you're no longer designing cards that work within a format and then seeing how people apply them. You're giving someone something where it's like, look, this was hyper designed for your format and it answers X, Y, and Z threat. Or, this is a hyper efficient threat for your format. It will work because it's an efficient mana cost to end result ratio. And I think I'm happy with where we are in the current design process, where they downshift stuff in master sets and we occasionally get something through the filter of a standard set, but it gives them a lot more control over the format, and I think in the long run is actually better because Popper's never getting its equivalent of the 4-color commanders or the partner commanders, which again, not so hot take here, but are a inherently toxic and bad mechanic for that format.
Dude, you got a lot of Commander takes today. I don't play enough Commander to have these takes.
No. And I definitely don't always share the viewpoint of a lot of other Commander players on these topics because I come from a different perspective. But I don't know, how would you feel if they said, hey, we're going to start designing cards with Pauper in mind, and every set there's going to be 2 to 3 cards that we think we've really pushed in the common slot because we want them to see play in Pauper. How would you feel about that?
It's just so counterintuitive for commons, I guess, that it sounds quite silly, Well,
like, silly as it might sound, like let's say Mark Rosewater comes out tomorrow and says that. Well,
I would say actually, I don't know if I would mind it, because that would also mean that that's probably a pretty good limited format.
So I'm not saying that they push the power level all commons. I'm saying that they go, hey, much like we've got legendary creatures in almost every set for Commander, we're going to make sure that there's, between 1 and 5 commons that we've pushed with the intention of them seeing play in Pauper. How do you feel about that?
I still don't think I really mind. It means that we can be excited for standard sets, but then I guess it's like too many cards almost. If you have 5 commons each set that enter the format.
I mean, it would keep diversity and freshness of the format at a record high, but I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I don't think that would be good. I can totally see the idea of it would be great to have Pauper specific products that introduce new things into the format, but I think at the end of the day, the current status quo is actually pretty good for us. We're not inundated with commons. We have these products that cater to us, even if not intentionally. And I think specifically with the non-reprint supplemental products, we've gotten some really great stuff out of them. Palace Sentinels is, I think, one of the most important cards that a conspiracy product has ever released. So I don't really know where I'm headed with this.
I know. Dude, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if we agree is the issue.
Yeah.
On that particular instance, because I think it'd be fun to have newer, sweeter cards in the format. And if you get them at a record pace, then maybe, like you said, the format's always changing, so it's always fresh, and you see a constant reiteration of decks, and people get to play with the new cards. So maybe it's not really so bad. And then but maybe what I was sort of getting at earlier, I guess, is that maybe that would be, I don't know where I'm going with this either. I don't think it would be that bad. I think we get new sweet cards all the time, and that'd be awesome.
Okay, that's totally fair. And
I imagine that's how most Commander players feel.
Yeah, I mean to be fair, these days when standard set spoilers come out, I definitely look more at the rares and mythics to go, oh, that would be cool to play in Commander, versus when I look at the commons, I'm like, all right, we've got to scrape together a spoiler show out of this somehow, and these are pretty miserable. So, wonder how this one's gonna go. But I don't know. I guess look at it through the lens of a common card from standard that wasn't, Treasure Cruise level powerful, but did fundamentally change the format at the time, like Grey Merchant of Asphodel. I think that's a good example of a standard card that was probably too good and got printed at common. That card would have been fine at uncommon for a limited format. I don't think anyone would have been upset by that. But I don't know. I guess are we kind of in the position of we either get cards that are minimal upgrades or side grades or minimally better than another card? Is that just our role with standard sets now? Or
and then sometimes though you get a real banger like 3-Minute Inspector or Pulsa Marasa, which are really, really good cards, and they go perfectly into the decks that want them. So maybe we're at, like we've been saying, we're at the happy medium here, where in the supplemental sets you get some really big format shaking cards that define archetypes, and then the standard sets you get mostly things that tinker around with the deck a little bit, are still strong enough to stand and be a part of the whole strategy.
Okay, I guess, like, I don't know. I came into this wanting to be like, we need better cards in standard, like, you know, it's terrible that we only get these in supplemental sets. But as this conversation has gone on, I feel like over the course of the past few years, like, with the uptick in supplemental sets in terms of volume, the format's just in a better position now, because we're not looking at, you know, the scraps of a set. We're now looking at the scraps of a set and going, okay, well, that's fine. We've got a supplemental set coming in a few months, and it's way more likely that they'll be selling in that, because, like, as I mentioned, we haven't talked about a single card from Rivals of Ixalan in the past couple of weeks in depth, and we know nothing about Masters 25 in the great scheme of things. And I'm already excited for it. I don't know about you, but, like, I'm already really amped on this set that we know nothing about for our format.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment. I actually drafted Rivals of Ixalan, and I don't remember the cards. I had like a pirate that flew, and then I had a pirate that turned into another. I was blue-black pirate, so I had a fun deck. But you're right, I don't really remember. It did a bunch of limited stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's a good way to synthesize and, like, conclude this discussion for us, because we've kind of just sort of gone in this sort of nebulous discussion topic. But
hey, you know, it happens.
I think at the end of the day, I'm happy with this, and I didn't come in expecting that to be where I left, but I think at the end of the day, this sort of, because I don't want to pretend like they're designing with Pauper that much in mind, but I think that they've found a way that our metagame is not getting shifted up all the time, you know, but whenever one of these supplemental sets hits, like, there are big impacts. Like, Modern Masters 2017 took Stompy to tier, you know, 0.5 for a while, where it was the deck to beat.
Yeah, look at it. Look how the mighty have fallen.
Right? Like, and then Ash Barons hits, and people suddenly start building these Is It Delver decks that prey upon the exact deck that came up. So I think, I guess, just imagine where I'm coming from is, imagine if selling on par with how Burning Tree Emissary affected the format was occurring every 3 months, plus every time a supplemental set hit.
It'd be a lot. It would be a lot.
It feels like that format would be utter chaos if, like, we're just getting smacked upside the head with all these, like, new cards that either create or redefine how an archetype works. And I think at the end of the day, and this might be controversial, I think the less cards that we get that are playable, the better long term it is for our format, because it allows for a level of stability while still allowing for a level of evolution when these supplemental sets come out.
The dripping faucet approach instead of the
yeah.
And I'm okay with it too. Oh man, I had a tangent I wanted to take on that, and it just, I guess really what I was trying to say is, you know, it's okay to be a little bit nebulous in our answer. I don't know if we were gonna, you know, it's all such nebulous talk anyway. So, you know, I don't know if we were ever gonna leave with a firm answer, but I do think that you're right. I do like the faucet dripping effect, where we get powerful cards every so often, and then, like I said, we get like side grades from time to time that help still bring a little bit of spice to the format, create some good decks.
All right, so I think we've come to some level of conclusion here, and what it is we're okay with the status quo, and I think I'm a little bit more cautious about this, having seen how another format has been affected by supplemental releases. A little bit more hands-on, but I guess moving forward, I kind of hope that they don't ever design something specifically for Pauper, and acknowledge that. I don't know, like if someone, at Wizards R&D is like, yeah, sure, this will be fun for Pauper, just let it be. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to think that our cards are being designed for us and that the metagame is being looked at under that level of harsh scrutiny. Because
much like
you've played
kind
Modern,
of the way
right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, kind of in the same vein that most people don't think Modern should be a Pro Tour. I think that's also where you're coming from. It sounds like.
Yeah. So you've played Modern. Can you maybe speak to that argument a little bit more eloquently than I could, as someone who's never played a game of Modern in my life?
Well, so where it all went kind of weird is there was a Modern Pro Tour like a while ago. Like I don't even remember how long. I don't remember which year it was, but it must. I was in my apartment then, so it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago at this point, probably 4. And there was a Modern Pro Tour, and basically everyone was playing some version of Storm. And this was before Storm was good. This was back when Treasure Cruise was legal. It was right after cons had come out. And so the big thing was the Jeskai Storm deck, the one where you would play like Winds into Con, Jeskai Ascendancy, and you would combo off and make it infinitely. It works kind of like actually the Freed from the Real combo. But you had Treasure Cruise and this card called Jeskai Ascendancy that let you untap. So basically, it was much more stable because you had like infinite mana. You could like go through your deck. It won with a card called like Fate Stitcher. Also, it was just like this crazy solo deck, and it was pretty good. But it was only good really because of Treasure Cruise. And so, but like basically everyone at the Pro Tour was either on that or they were on like the more traditional blue-red Pyromancer Storm list. Keep in mind this is before Baral was printed. And so it was a very like ingrown metagame for that format, especially for a format that we now know to have lots and lots of viable decks, 10 plus viable decks. And I think that that's where some of that, discussion comes from is, do we really want to stagnate this by, putting the best and the brightest on it and then them finding out how to like break the format by accident and running these like very non-interactive combo decks. Does that make sense? Did I make sense in there?
Yeah. And I think like there's now, from what I understand within the Modern community, there's kind of this sort of approach of like, I hope Wizards doesn't, swap the format up on us because, and obviously, with
and the bannings are the other big thing.
Because
bannings are not fun.
Where we're talking about introducing new cards into the format, I don't think it's a one-to-one analogous situation, but I think,
well, with more cards comes more potential for bannings is an argument.
Yeah, and I think I just think that the less Wizards interferes with our format, and admittedly they have been incredibly hands off. I think that the more that if they were to kind of, and obviously with the heightened spotlight on Pauper, this is more and more likely with every passing day, if they took an interest in trying to make Pauper more of a thing, my concern would be that in doing so, they would damage the format. And for example, like if it was a Pro Tour format, like just tossing it out there, just the complete absurd option of it's a Pro Tour format, what's to say that Wizards wouldn't start making bans in order to spice things up? Because that was the Splinter Twin ban where they said, for sake of diversity, we have banned Splinter Twin. So
yeah, I see where you're coming from. It goes back to that we don't want the level of scrutiny that other formats have. That's not to say that the format shouldn't grow or become like a GP or another format, but the Pro Tour is designed to sell Magic cards at its very core, and so I think it is best left up to standard and limited by and large.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I don't want Wizards to meddle with this format outside of obvious necessary bans. For example, Peregrine Drake, which was absolutely warping the format. I think
Drake was awful.
Yeah, no, it was a terrible time. I don't want to seem like, because there's definitely like a reactionary argument within the Pauper community of like, it's our format, everyone should leave, like things were fine before other people started getting into it. And I don't think that's where I want to come from in this argument, because I think that inherently that argument is not good for the format. I think the more people that play it, the better.
But these are two different things.
Yeah, I just want like a level of clarity for the listeners at home that
Gotcha.
I want simultaneously, you know, quote typical millennial. I want everything. I want everything cared for, but I don't want it, you know, over cared for. I just,
you millennial.
right. We're both just a pair of horrible millennials killing Applebee's over here. But yeah, I think the crux of what it is I don't want Wizards touching the format too much and smothering it, but I also want to make sure that they don't cut off the flow of good commons in the form of the Masters sets. I don't know. Right. We've rambled a lot. Do you have any sort of closing thoughts on this whole supplemental versus standard sets and the commons that we see in them? Or are you good to take us out of the show? I guess I just want to make sure we get everything wrapped up.
I'll sum up the viewpoints. We like that there is a faucet system where we get the supplemental sets and they have high impact cards, and that is bolstered by some of the standard sets, which all the cards are lower impact, are still seeing play in utility roles. I might have underplayed Firebrand Archer a little bit earlier. I looked, and a lot of burn decks are just playing it, so maybe it is a game changer. But you know, there are cards that are a little bit more subtle, which is fine. It's fine. It fits in with Wizards' New World Order motto. So we do like that. We do like all the new people in the format, and really the big thing that we need to tackle as a community is the merging. This is a whole other episode. Is the merging of the online and offline card pools. That's really that's like our next big step as a format. Sure, we're getting a lot of steam, but that's still like the most confusing part. And so I think that's our next big hurdle together as a community. Pretty much sum up what you think too, Mike.
Yeah, I think you hit all the major points there. Thank you for more eloquently phrasing what it took me the better part of an hour to get through. But
hey,
yeah,
no, that's why we have we have a podcast about conversations. So it's cool. It's cool. But to everyone else out there, thank you for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our patrons. Please consider supporting us if you like the show. You can check below this video or our description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L. And today's patron shout out is going to be to Hex. He or her has been with us for quite a long time. Thank you, Hex, for all of your support. You're great to talk to, and I'm glad we hang out. And with that, that's it. Signing off for Color Commentary. Oh, I forgot to thank Pat's Games, my LGS, and JP Comics, Mike's LGS. Wow. And L, he writes our theme songs.